Hi, everyone. The idea of this panel, it's called What Building in the Open Really Looks Like. This was a panel inspired by a conversation Tara and I had when we were working together. I was like, we do all this stuff. We should have a panel about it. And then we went and found Ashraf to join us. And we were thinking about, this past year, we've survived doing a lot of things fully online. And we're just starting to kind of reflect on that. I think a lot of us are still in that survival mode, but there's been a lot of participation, collaboration, events, and coordinations, and trying different ways of engaging with people, sharing our work and things like that. And so for many people we know and the people here today, these changes and pivots in strategy and figuring out how to make things engaging at a time where everything is on Zoom have been in the public. And so, mistakes as well as successes have been in the public. And I wanted to chat with these two awesome community contributors about what they learned building those things in the open and some of the challenges that they faced, and maybe some big ideas for if we're going to be home for another year, how we can keep things fresh and engaging despite everything being on this 2D screen of ours. We can start with introductions. I put myself first in the list, and now I feel kind of silly. But I'm Fatima. I work as a developer programs engineer at Pantheon. That's a really fancy title for I do the tech stuff on a developer relations team. So that's maintaining our repos, giving trainings, and then engaging with communities like our Drupal community and our WordPress community, and attending conferences like this one. I'm really excited to be here, even though it's 1 a.m. So I might start ramping up energy as we go because I realize I'm starting to get fully awake. But I'm happy to be here. This is going to be very conversational. This panel was built in the open. But yeah, I will pass it on to Tara for an intro.
Sure. I am Tara King. You might know me from Drupal Spaces as Sparkling Robots. I use she or they pronouns, and it's 2 a.m. here for me. So similarly, kind of getting up to speed with everyone. Just took a short nap, 2-hour nap before this. I work at Automattic, which don't tell anybody, is a company that runs a bunch of WordPress stuff. So if you're not familiar, that's what Automattic is, a big WordPress company. And I am running a team on their open source side. So fully open team working on behalf of the community. So that's my current role.
Right. Yeah. Hello. I'm Ashraf. I should say my name right. I'm Ashraf. But let's see. So I'm the founder of Debug Academy. We basically do training for Drupal and React, as well as consulting and whatnot. I have all the Grandmaster certifications from when I used to work at Acquia, and yeah, it's been interesting, building a team and deciding what direction to take the company in these times where we're all remote and frankly, where a lot of us don't feel like working that hard all the time because we're kind of burned out. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to nowadays.
That's great. Thank you for intros. And I totally feel that at a time where we're all burnt out, and it feels like we have more work now that we work from home, at least for me. And that's something I've been trying to struggle with. But that's probably a different panel, or maybe a part of this panel. The first question I had for us was what we mean by building in the public. I think not everyone might understand what building in the open means. So maybe we can share some examples of what that is, and kind of move into what different types of building in the open look like. I can punt. Ashraf?
Sure. Yeah, so with building in the public, I feel like it has different connotations depending on what circles you're in. And something that I've been seeing a lot is on Twitter, people are basically, there's a hashtag build in public where they share progress on, what they're working on. So it could take the flavor of, this is what I'm building. Let me show you progress to sort of probably build excitement and whatnot. There's another level where you actually write open source code, build a project on GitHub, for example, and people then have the ability to contribute. And a third category of building in public, in my mind, is, or maybe a subset of building open source work, is making sure you sort of build within systems that provide certain benefits. So what I mean is, like, on Drupal.org, you could build a project there, and you could silently build it on your computer and then upload it all at once, or you can create issues as you go and sort of build your roadmap in the public in that way, which has certain benefits because you build your reputation in your profile and such. So yeah, there's all sorts of building in the public. There's even just, like, back to the whole Twitter example, you could just tweet about, like, oh, we hired this person on our team. Oh, we're, working on the following goals, and every one of these types, comes with a number of trade-offs, and they're completely different in execution and how they, impact you. Yeah, that's it for now. I mean, we're a small enough panel. Should we pretty much each answer all of the questions?
Yeah, I'd be cool with that. If we want to just keep going in a circle,
Okay.
and feel free to just add things as you see them. If you hear a pause, it's hard to, like, follow someone's facial cues, but
I'll jump in then. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Ashraf actually pretty much nailed it in terms of the kinds of works that I'm doing in public, directly open source work, and then sort of this open source style work for things that are perhaps closed platforms, closed source. And I think the thing that has been a real theme in my career, even when I wasn't really working in public, is always trying to involve anybody who's being affected by the project I'm working on. So even if it's entirely internal, like an intranet project or something, trying to get the sort of broadest possible number of people involved as early as possible so they can see what's happening, instead of, here's, like, one of my jobs, here's 36 months of development that we're going to drop on people who'd have no interest in using the tool we just spent 36 months on. So having that experience has really pushed me towards fail early and often and publicly. Just today, I got on today, I guess technically yesterday, whatever day it is. I don't know how to talk about things when I'm up at 2 a.m, but I got on a live stream and just, like, did a bunch of testing for the WordPress project on a live stream, which made it look like I'd never touched a WordPress site before. It was, but, like, that kind of thing, just doing it in public as often as possible so that people can, follow along, see what you're up to.
yeah, I certainly don't get to do a lot of the build in public. I think we're still kind of pseudo build in public, where we get it to, like, 80%, and then we're very comfortable as a company or an org inside the company to release it to the public. So that can be a little bit frustrating. Like, I've worked at organizations before that were, like, fully in the public, where our entire issue queue was on GitHub and you could see us arguing on GitHub. And I liked that a little bit more because we had this, like, accountability to showcase why we made certain decisions. So, like, if we were pivoting the goal of an application, we had to tell people why we did that. And as soon as you have to explain why, you then have to, like, actually make sure you have a valid reason. And so I think that helped motivate us to, like, have valid user research backed reasons or customer research backed reasons to make decisions. And I don't feel like I get to do that as in the most pressured way now, but I would like to move towards doing more of that. I think, unfortunately, I think one of the things is that the pandemic has caused us to not want to fail in public, but that's also something we can discuss. Like, what are the upsides to building in the open? And then we can talk about downsides. Maybe we should talk about downsides first, actually, because then we can like lift the mood with the upside. So I'll give a downside, and then Ashraf, I'll pass it to you. I think that's one of my downsides, is that it's a pandemic and everyone's like doing their best work online, and a lot of times in that kind of sphere, it's very hard to release any kind of failure or something that wasn't quite a failure without like spinning it and making it sound like here's all the things we learned, so you forget about the part where we said this was a mistake. And I think that like competitive zone of thinking is kind of damaging, because over time, like, your failures become meaningless because you're spinning them every time you talk about them. And if we had been more transparent about these projects, maybe we would have been more transparent about the failures and the decisions, and we wouldn't have this need to like wrap everything up into a shiny little box. And so I think that's to me one of the disadvantages of trying to work in the public but not being fully there yet, is that you're not very authentic when you mess things up.
I can jump in. Okay, so yeah, in terms of downsides of building in public, one of them is that, obviously we're referring to it as building in public, and we're all at home, and sort of the public refers to online. And in a lot of cases, you might post, I'm building about this, I'm building about that, and not really get much of a reaction at all, especially depending on what you're working on. So I feel like that can be demoralizing sometimes, where, we're building this cool new thing for whatever website, and maybe you get like 2 likes on the tweet, or, which
Like building into the void.
exactly. So that feels to me like one of the bigger downsides, because if you compare it to working in person you can share it. You can have I don't know, the water cooler chat where you're physically there with a couple of people, and you can say, hey, this is what I'm working on, and see their facial expressions and reactions, and one excited person might be enough to be like, yeah, this is worth it. Whereas if you post about it on Twitter, that excited person might just like it, and it feels like, oh, I only got 1 like on this. They're probably just being nice. It doesn't feel, validating, which brings you to this whole like dynamics of social media being a popularity contest and all that stuff. But yeah, that feels to me like one of the downsides. It takes more reactions from more people when nobody's in the mood to react, for you to feel that sense of validation.
I was going to say there's also the downside of being that person who feels like you have to react. And then you said it, where that exhaustion of being online all the time, and feeling like, I know they worked so hard on this and I want them to feel good about it. And I also just don't have it in me to like post something more detailed. I'll say one thing I'm struggling with now at my new position in the WordPress community is almost the opposite, which is so much feedback. It's like a blessing. I'm not gonna ever, I don't mean to complain about it, but when you work in public, everyone gets to have an opinion, and everyone thinks, wants you to listen. And one of the things I'm running into is when you're building something as big as something like WordPress or Drupal, really, I mean, in public, it's people don't feel heard. And it's like, well, I'm listening to 6 million people shouting at once, and they're all saying different things, and I can't, you just are outnumbered, and so it's wonderful to build a public that way, because you do get all this great feedback, but also, no matter how much you want to listen, you physically and emotionally cannot. It's not possible, and so trying to find ways to kind of scale that ability to listen and ability to interact without personally trying to scale it by, hours or hard work is, it's really challenging. I think this is maybe why it feels like in the pandemic there's more work. Like Fatima said, it feels like there's more work. It's like there may or may not be, but I definitely feel this, like, all these people want something, and I cannot talk to everyone who runs a WordPress site. It's not, but I feel that pressure to do so. It also slows everything down. Trying to get that feedback, trying to implement that feedback. It's really, really slow to build in public. A lot of depending if you're talking more about like launching your own thing, just telling people you're doing it a lot. But if you're building with a community, it is slow.
Yeah, you're right. I think if you're building with or for a community, then the feedback loops of taking in their feedback and building and then showing that you were listening, I think that's another part to what you're talking about, is you also have to then prove that you were listening, and show them that
100%.
they were represented in your work, and that must be really hard. We can talk about the upsides to building in public. Maybe we'll go reverse this time. I can punt to Tara instead. Slowly losing my voice at 2 a.m. A kitty.
The kitty is so confused. Is it breakfast time? Is
The
it
kitty's
dinner
like,
time?
I'm kittying in the public. You can feed me in
Yeah.
the public as well.
Exactly. Yeah, so upsides of building in public. I mean, for one thing, so I have this team and we're going out and we're trying to make sure developers are satisfied by the experience of building in the WordPress space and adopting the new tools. And it's kind of incredible to wake up and come to work and somebody in Slack is saying, "Oh, hey, so and so built this tool. So and so put together this theme." And they've open sourced it and they've contributed it back. Because it's like you have this backlog of all the stuff you want to do because you're listening to 6 million people. I honestly don't know how many WordPress developers there are. And then somebody else does it for you. It's like Christmas sometimes, or, it's your birthday. It's like, here's your surprise. Somebody did your work for you. So that's kind of magical. That's really, really cool. And I think also other people who are doing it are aware of how hard it is. And so there's sort of very tight bond, I think, among people who work together in public. And so it's really easy to kind of find I have personally at least found it easy to find my way in these kinds of communities because people are so excited when you want to get involved. They're like, "Come on over, I'll teach you everything." So that's been great.
Okay. Yeah, there's been a couple upsides for me. I've been focusing on Twitter because I feel like it has the potential of just reaching out to people outside of my own circle. And I guess two upsides. One, with Twitter, I've actually found a number of my employees through Twitter. And it's people who probably never would have applied to the jobs in the first place. But, I just have conversations with people I don't know. And like one of them told me, "Hey, you're a training company. This junior developer was teaching me," because they were also trying to learn to code. But they said, "This junior developer was teaching me. They're currently unemployed. And, she was such a good teacher. If you're hiring, reach out to her." And I ended up reaching out to her. And, part of this came out of me building in public, right? I'm like posting about my team, posting about what we do and whatnot. And eventually, a month later, I ended up hiring her, and she's been working full time for 6 months with us. But one thing I want to point out, I didn't mention it as a type of build in public, but really there's levels of build in public, and there's Twitter where you're posting to the whole world, but people tend to be more comfortable responding when it's a smaller group. And so one thing I found is there are certain like private Slack communities, and I know this sounds like it's against the ethos of building in public, but I've found different benefits to both, right? Twitter, I meet more people, private Slack communities or private Discord or whatever it may be, and maybe private isn't a hard requirement, but smaller groups in Slack or Discord, they tend to be willing to give more feedback because they don't feel like there's a risk of other random people reading their feedback and misinterpreting it and defending you and whatnot. So I actually have a couple of, Slack communities focused on software as a service or entrepreneurship. And I feel like I can always come to them. I can say the same message on Twitter. Hey, give me feedback on this. And maybe one person will reply. And I can go to this small community with like 100 members and say, hey, give me feedback on this. And I'll get paragraphs of responses and really good feedback from multiple people. And, so if you, and basically that has been very valuable to me. So I think it's helpful to know, there are different communities that might be relevant to what you're doing. And if you're not getting the feedback you desire from your posts and whatnot, it might just not be the right forum for it. And there might be a smaller community where it would be more productive. But basically, yeah, that has been very helpful to me, knowing I have these options and posting certain content to one and certain content to others.
Yeah, that as well as what Scott is saying in the chat about open sourcing their repo and then having all this overhead time because people are contributing to it made me think that like sometimes you have to decide like what value do I want by open sourcing this thing, or like what kind of feedback do I want. And not sure if what you're saying about like a smaller group giving you more tailored or personal or detailed feedback like makes sense to me, because those people have the opportunity to like have a rapport with you maybe, or like be able to say it in a space that might feel safer than like the Twitters. And so maybe that's something people should think about when they're looking to get or put things in the open, is maybe you start with your niche communities. Maybe you start with like a channel in Drupal Slack for your local Drupal meetup, and then you kind of go from there and start broadcasting it to larger groups. As well as like something that we thought about at Code for Canada was like, what are we going to do with the feedback? And like, why do we need the feedback? And those questions helped us figure out like, oh, do we want to put our newsletter out to the entire world, or do we just need feedback from our department that we're working with? And so for us, like that particular newsletter wasn't useful to the Twitter community that we were engaging with, whereas it was really useful to the people in our department that we didn't work with on a day-to-day, but could keep updated on our project. And so it was interesting to find, like you said, the different venues for value, where, figuring out like, I don't want to always be screaming into like 10,000 people, but these like 9 people really want to hear about my project. And so, yeah, I really like the idea of like figuring out what option or what venue for the thing that you're working on that you want to share. And maybe what time in the project, like maybe it's too early for Scott's team to share that project out in the open.
It makes me think the most restrictive Slack community that I'm part of, I think Fatima's part of this as well, is designed almost for people who work in the open, for developer relations professionals. And I really think they're very strict. I actually have been rejected. I got rejected when I first applied. And it's because they want to give that space, that same space that you're talking about, where it's a comfortable place where people are not going to be misinterpreting it because they're doing the same kind of work. So when you're like, hey, how does this post sound, or how does this idea sound, they can give that feedback. And it was so strange to me when I first joined it, because like I said, they have this really strict process and thing to get people in. And I thought, this seems so restrictive. Why would we want to keep people out? And then now that I'm in there, I see why. It's because we're with the public all the time, and that can be wonderful and it can be terrible, and these people get it. So it's really nice to have that space.
That seems like a natural transition to start talking about maybe the strategies that you might have with building in the open, things that you think about when you're figuring out which audience you want to share your work with, or how you want to share your work, whether that's on GitHub or on Twitter, as well as the tools that you use, some of which we've already kind of talked about. I personally, I've noticed that like a lot of agencies now have like a newsletter attached to their Twitter profile. So like Orbit was doing 100 Days of Community, which is their 100-day event where they have this hashtag and everybody shares their learnings about community building and maintaining, and they kind of aggregate it into this newsletter. And I think it's powered by a company called Revue, Revue, and it'll embed your newsletter sign up on your Twitter page. And I was like, oh, do I want to have a newsletter? What value would that bring my followers? But it was definitely something cool that I was thinking about as like a tool or strategy where maybe you tweet a lot of really interesting things. Every time I hit the count, like the word count, Twitter's like, do you want to tweet a newsletter? And I'm like, stop. Like, I really just want to tweet a thread today, but thanks for the like planting the seed in my head. But I thought that was an interesting form of content. Like if there's somebody who's working on things and they have a new, like I'm more likely to sign up if I'm already been following their work. And so that's my tool share of the day. I will punt it to Ashraf for tools or strategies.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it all depends on, like you said, what value you're hoping to get out of it. So for me personally, I've got Debug Academy, right? That's for training primarily, and contracts work and whatnot. I also have something called Puffin Pay, which isn't released yet, but it's like a payment tool, geared towards. Nowadays, I feel like there's a lot of creators out there who aren't so focused or who struggle between capitalistic ideals, like I need to get as much money as possible, with balancing that with just wanting to give their content for free to help people out or for cheap to make it accessible. So it's a payment tool where you can basically say, this is how much I'd like to receive. And people who buy it can basically say, okay, I'll pay that. Let me make a payment plan that works for me, or let me ask to pay less, or that sort of more flexible thing. The point being, with Debug Academy, my goal is mostly like, or my strategy is, let me show how this has worked for others, people who have graduated the class, etc. Yes, puffinpay.io. With Debug Academy, it's like, you want to show people how others have benefited so they can relate to it and whatnot. But with something like Puffin Pay, where you're building a tool, it's a bit of a different audience. And at the end of the day, both of my strategies are geared towards, let me get people to follow so they can know what I'm building, and if it's helpful to them, use it at some point. But with something like that, where I don't have case studies, the best way is not to keep saying, hey, here's what I'm building, check it out, please follow, blah, blah, blah. People don't like to be advertised to. It's better to, the strategy I've employed is trying to provide value, provide value to people who are your target customer. So for Puffin Pay, it would be like entrepreneurs or people who are looking to write an ebook or whatever it may be. So the strategy for building in the open there would be maybe follow prominent people in the space, try to make helpful contributions to their threads, try to post advice like, hey, I had a project, here's what I did to solve the following problem. Try to post things people would be interested in reading, even if they're not ever a customer. And then periodically you can share what you're building. So I think it's important not to always get straight to the point with building in the open. And this obviously depends. If it's an open source project, probably get straight to the point, and people will engage if it makes sense. If it's more you're building a company or a closed source product, nobody wants to be advertised to all the time. So at the end of the day, I'd say with an open source project, you're providing the value by building the open source project. And I think with closed source, you might want to find ways to provide value to people who are not your customers, because they have to have a reason to even try you out and become your customer. Um, yeah, so hope that answered it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, I think, at Pantheon, when I was working in the community side there are really passionate Pantheon customers who do want us to talk to them a lot. But I also think that trust is very easily broken on a closed source platform or in a commercial space where you just absolutely have to bring like your A game as far as your authenticity and as far as your sort of accuracy and commitment to
And
them.
all of
Like if it's not authentic, if you don't actually,
goodwill. Like, I was just like, all
yeah,
of that
exactly.
goodwill will come back to help you.
Yeah, that will come back. And the moment that you break it, I think people are, that relationship is different, like you said, from an open source project, because there's money involved and there's a power differential, right? Like the company wants the money, the people want the stuff the company's kind of got behind lock and key, and things get weird. In open source, it's like the things that I'm dealing with in terms of needing tools that I don't have right now are to manage input from the community. There's so many people, and like I said earlier, it's just hard to listen. So trying to find ways to listen without relying just on personal networks, because also when you're building in the open, your personal network is useful, but it's also limited in terms of the fact that it's not going to get the whole community there. I'm really enjoying as a tool. Twitch and streaming. People are really responding to it, we're finding. And it kind of has this like fun dynamic where you're literally building in the open. We're updating examples. So in the Drupal world, this would be like the examples for developers module. We're updating the examples there because they're out of date. And so in the process of getting that work done, people are learning sort of how to build these blocks that are giving people a lot of fits. So that's really fun. And then while you're doing it, you're not just sort of sitting there like hammering out example after example. You're having conversations, and it's this conversation thing. Obviously, Twitch just had like 100% of their data leaked. So not actually here to specifically recommend Twitch as a tool, but the concept of streaming has been really useful. And like I said, there's something kind of freeing about going online. Like I said earlier today, I went online. I looked like I'd never touched a WordPress site before. And I guess it was kind of embarrassing, but it wasn't like deeply humiliating. It's just a little bit embarrassing. And it kind of keeps you humble, but it also, it shows everyone that you're a person too, right? And when you're building in public, I think that reminder that you're a human just like everybody else, that you're not actually corporate drone it's really helpful.
We were talking just yesterday on my team about how being uncomfortable with not being the expert on something and being upfront about that is like an unteachable skill. Like you have to be uncomfortable so many times that you'll get to a point where you're like, I don't know a lot of things and I'm okay with it now. But it's a personal journey to get to that point where you're like, I'm figuring this out too. I'm supposed to know this, but I don't. So here's how I Google it for you. And so that's definitely something that I feel like we've faced a lot in the Drupal community, as well as WordPress, as well as like these developer relations roles that I'm in, that it's just like I learn how to say like, I don't know that, but I can look it up for you. And sometimes that after 30 minutes, that's like, sorry, I don't know what's going on. I will get back to you at some point. But for that to happen on a stream, that's a new level of like radical transparency.
I was in front of the people who build the tool. That's who showed up to my stream. I didn't know who was going to come. I was not expecting a bunch of core committers. And I was adding blocks, and one of them, I genuinely had no idea what it was supposed to do. A lot of it I could figure out from context, like from either the actual UI or something. And this one I was just like, I don't know. I guess I'll just like type something in this box, and then like I would get not a number errors. I was like, I still don't know what this is supposed to do. And they were also engaging though in this process of this like sort of radical transparency of like, I want to see you do this because I don't take it personally. you know, I totally understand that this block is not ready for prime time yet. So it was great, but I could easily see it going very poorly for someone who isn't kind of ready to be sort of calmly and candidly clueless. It's kind of my specialty, I guess, these days.
Another thing I was thinking about hearing the two of you talk about the differences between like closed source projects going open and open source projects going open, working in the open source projects being open source projects, was that like, we've talked a little bit about like strategies and tools, but I'm wondering like how do you like figure out how much is enough for success? So like what does success look like when you're working in the open? And do you measure those interactions that you're having in different ways, to make sure that you're not like always in the open, or like, oh, like, how do you make sure that you're doing a reasonable amount of work to engage with the people that you're working for, while also like working on the product itself? Because I imagine like those are two different tasks in your head. I see Tara nodding, so I'll pass this to you first.
I have so many thoughts. It's tough. I mean, especially once you become known for someone who works as a project or as an individual who works this way, people want to talk to you about it all the time. Their website goes down and they want to talk to you about it, even though 99% of the time it's actually just like they installed a broken module or something, or misconfigured something, and it's not related to the work you're doing necessarily. They want to talk. And so I think for me, I have had to draw really strict boundaries around my work time. Like I don't keep anything on my devices for work. I am logged into Twitter there, but I've turned off all the push notifications. So, somebody DMing me because we met at a Drupal camp or something isn't going to wake me up at 2 a.m. So I had to be really specific about that because it's really easy and people are very persistent in terms of finding ways to reach out. So that's been one thing that has been not hard, but worth watching out for. And then in terms of measuring, I wish I had like the right answer because that would make my job a lot easier. I feel there's a couple ways of doing this. One way I like to measure is more qualitative, and it's about collecting quotes from people, both happy and sad, right? There's this sort of, we've got this sort of computer in our mind, right? That like we actually process a lot. And so when we're going through like Twitter or streams of feedback from customers, there's certain ones that resonate. And I've learned that it's just a good idea to trust the sort of whatever I've got in my brain that says, this one is accurate. This one is a great way of, often it sort of summarizes something that I've heard lots of other people say less clearly. So saving that direct word for word feedback, both for, internal reporting purposes, like, hey, so-and-so did a great job. And I know that because look at the chat from their talk, look at these highlights and these kind words. So there's sort of this qualitative thing where you're taking just the words that people will give you and putting that somewhere. Quantitatively, like in terms of numbers, it's very challenging. If you're doing it for a community that's for like a closed source product like Pantheon or something like that, you can often control the tooling a little bit to see how many members you have or how active they are. But Drupal.org and WordPress.org and these open source tools were built many years ago, and we're not built for this kind of metrics. And I'm not sure that those kind of metrics make sense in an open source project because people have privacy. They have a right to privacy, and I shouldn't be actually tracking all their behavior on Drupal.org, right? Like, I don't think that's really appropriate. And so then you have to kind of find these proxy metrics, and nobody really wants like a proxy metric that's sort of like, well, we think more people are tweeting about Drupal than used to be tweeting about Drupal. But a lot of times that's kind of what I've ended up relying on is stuff that's close to what I actually want because it's not possible to get it.
So we're right about at time, so I'll make it quick. But let's see. Yeah, one of the things that's really takes getting used to is what's it called? Is you don't necessarily get the feedback right away. So if someone were to start building in public today, like your company is open sourcing a product, you might get no responses for weeks, and that's really hard to process, because you don't know if you're wasting your time, and you can't know until you've done it for a while. So unfortunately, sometimes you need to do it for months before if before you can really evaluate how people are reacting to it. So that's one thing to be aware of. But you should remember why you're doing it in the first place. Then do it for a few months, and then evaluate if you're actually benefiting, or if you're just enjoying the dopamine hits when people like the posts. So yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to say. So good.
Well, yeah, that sounds like great advice. Both qualitatively capturing things, and then as well as giving it some time and making sure that you're also ready for getting some of that value, but also that people are starting to get used to it. We are at time. This was such a great conversation. Thank you for coming and hanging out with me in the bright hours of the morning. I hope it was useful for everyone. Maybe drop your Twitter handles into the chat so that everyone knows where to find you and the things that you've been talking about, working on. Yeah, thank you so much for being on this panel.
Thank you, Fatima, for organizing. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for all your help. We built this together, literally in a Google Doc in the open.
And recruited people on Twitter for it. So
Yeah. Open social. Take care.